Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Tanessa, the event coordinator for the FAU Libraries, and I would like to welcome you to this webinar, Making Scholarly and Creative Work More Available, Introduction to Open Access. Even though our buildings are not currently offering face-to-face events, the FAU Libraries work virtually to continue to provide support for teaching, research, and learning. We hope that you find that this webinar will do just that. Today, we are welcoming the FAU Library's Scholarly Communication Coordinator, Christy Padron. She will be taking questions at the end of the presentation, but please feel free to use the chat box at any time to submit those questions. This webinar will be recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed to you after the session with a brief evaluation survey that we hope you will fill out to help us plan future presentations. Now that the housekeeping is out of the way, I would like to turn it over to Christy.
Thank you, Tanessa. The title of this presentation for Open Access Week is Making Scholarly and Creative Works More Available, an Open Introduction to Open Access. Today's objectives will be to outline the general background of commercial publishing, also known as scholarly or academic publishing, and its business model. We'll also define open access and its attributes, identify open access publications, and list ways you can support open access publishing. But first, an overview of commercial publishing will be very helpful to put it all in context. Scholarly and some creative works are communicated through the commercial publishing industry. This is also known as scholarly, academic, professional, or conventional publishing. To give a brief overview of the history, scholarly journals were created by professional academic societies to communicate their work and related matters. Usually scholars had talked about their experiments and innovations, made announcements, and they also posted their correspondences in these journals. But before that, scholars usually wrote to each other individually or in groups about the research or discoveries that they were making. After World War II, this changed a bit. Scholarly societies collaborated with commercial publishers who provided additional services and also helped its backlog. So this was influenced by various resources. Scholarly societies found that they couldn't keep up with the manuscripts or the articles that people wanted to publish in their journals. They also saw that the personnel needed and the time needed to publish a journal was also quite a bit for them to scale. So publishers provided various services to the societies in exchange for a portion of the funds from the journal subscriptions. If you want to read a really interesting overview about this development, look at this Barani article in 2017 that appeared in the Guardian UK newspaper. Many changes then came to publishing with the emergence of the World Wide Web. So although people were still reading books and looking at the paper-based journal articles and other sources, a lot of these were increasingly becoming available through the internet. And at the same time, higher education also saw some changes to their funding, which also affects the whole scholarly communication scheme, especially in universities. To give a description of the current business model, authors contribute content and usually transfer their copyright to the publisher. So if I were to submit my manuscript or final draft of an article to a publisher like Taylor and Francis, although I would be listed as the author, the publisher is actually the entity that holds my copyright. In exchange, the publishers do provide some services like the peer review management. They also do the copy editing, web hosting, marketing, and then the distribution of my article or the others that they publish. Libraries then purchase access to scholarly publications through licenses and subscriptions. So the libraries do have contracts with Elsevier, Sage, Taylor, Francis, and other publishers so that we can provide you access to what is being published in the scientific, creative, social science, humanities, and other disciplines. Then with then also funding with higher education happened at the same time that a lot of the changes with the ways that publishers were doing business happened. This resulted in something known as a serial crisis, which I'll go into in just a moment. But to give you a little overview, specializations in research journals increased, so more and more new and additional publications were created. So there wasn't just like three major nursing journals that were out there. There became specializations within nursing and other subjects and disciplines like surgical nursing, anesthesiology and nursing, nursing for special populations and such. Now that's just one example for one discipline of nursing, but such things happen for other disciplines too. The last publishing industry count of journals that are out there is 42,500. So there are that many that are being published right now, and probably even more because that statistic was done a little while ago. Then at the same time, the cost of academic journal subscriptions outpaced library budgets with a range of increases of 4 to 8% since the 1980s. And I will add, this isn't 4 to 8% increase since the 1980s, that is like in that last span of 35 plus years, but more like the prices of journals would increase by 4 to 8% every year since the mid 80s or so. So that's done a real challenge for libraries. We spend up to 75% of our budgets on journals. And at the same time, we've seen decreased allocations from our universities over the past 20 years. The Association of Research Libraries, a North American consortium of libraries, have done this estimate and said that in real dollars, we get 50% less than what we did 20 years ago. Now, because of that, commercial publishing has faced a lot of criticism to its business model, and not just from libraries, but also by people who fund research. Like one of the big things is the funding of research and scholarly and creative outputs. Who funds all this? Governments do, usually through salaries or grants. Institutions do by the same ways, and funders also sponsor research, such as foundations and institutes and organizations like that. Another criticism of commercial publishing is the use of unpaid labor. Now, although they do provide services like the copy editing, the marketing, and the distribution, the peer review process and the editorial tasks are largely done by unpaid labor. Faculty and professors are expected to do these kinds of things as service to the profession. So the commercial publishers really, really do get a lot of use out of unpaid labor. And then the profits for commercial publishing, it is an extremely lucrative business. And you look at the revenue stream, it was $25 billion in 2017. So commercial publishing made that much money in 2017. The largest was a publisher called Elsevier. It's let's see, it made $3.35 billion in 2017, and its profit was 35%. So that's actually larger than Apple and Google, and also oil companies. So if you wanted to get a perspective on how lucrative it is and compare it to the hot industries like IT and internet, that's where we are. Now, when we look at the criticisms of the business model, you can also look at it from the intellectual perspective too, especially with copyright. Authors give their copyright to commercial publishers. Now, it doesn't sound like too terrible of an exchange, but it really affects how authors can share, distribute, or post their work, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. Commercial publishing also uses a very restrictive distribution model. It used to be that when people wanted to look at a journal, they could just come into the library, pull it off the shelf, and read it. But now a library has to have a subscription. If somebody wants online access to a journal, their institution has to have a subscription or they won't be able to look at it, or they may have to pay for it. That's known as a paywall, when you pay for an article when your institution does not have a subscription. Paywalls can range from anywhere from $5 to $75 or more. And then the costs too. We just mentioned the cereals crisis and how the cost of cereals have increased 4 to 8% every year since 1985 roughly. which resulted into the cereals crisis. And then also something else that a lot of people are not aware of is that journals costs do vary by discipline. Just to give you a scope, in 2020, the average cost of any given journal in any given academic subject is going to be $1,638, which saw a 6% change from the previous year. But if you have a humanities discipline and you read those types of journals, it's going to be $468 as an average cost for a title. Social sciences, it then goes up to $1,019. And then it really makes a jump when you go into the sciences. Health sciences are roughly $1,500 per average title, while STEM is about $2,416 per title. And even within STEM, it shows quite a bit of variance too, with math and computer science having an average cost of $1,700 and then escalating all the way to $5,897 for chemistry. So there's a lot of variance in the costs of journals. And when you think about all the journals that students, faculty, and scholars need access to, we need access to hundreds of journals a year. Just think about that and the average cost of titles, and that's what libraries have to come up with every year to get this information. Now here's where open access enters the scene. Our Dean of Libraries, Carol Higson, has made the statement in support of public access. She states, and I think most of us can agree with this, that faculty work very hard to carry out useful research, and then they turn it over to publishers who typically restrict access to those who can pay. The open access movement encourages faculty to retain control over their research and provides tools to help faculty make results widely available. Especially when you think about what's happening with COVID right now, a lot of faculty who want to create immunizations and testings and other responses to the pandemic really are thwarted because up to 70% of the published academic research is subscription-based or hidden behind a paywall. A lot of scientists and researchers have expressed a lot of frustration with not being able to get the access to the information that they need. And open access is something that we hope can respond to this. Now we're going to define open access. Open access allows users free, unrestricted online access to journals and other types of content or publications. So this could be journal articles that I really emphasized recently, but it could also mean book chapters and books too. There are some that are starting to use open access models. Open access developed as a response to technological changes in scholarly publishing, particularly when it went from being print and paper-based to being online and things that could be read on the internet. And it also responded to changes in the commercial publishing business model and the criticisms that I had just mentioned. And technology, thanks to it being electronic and online, does allow for easier, faster, and lower cost to create and deliver information. So publishing a journal isn't quite as high cost as it was in the past. I'd say the best way to explain open access is describe what it is not and compare it with what it is and what it can do or does. Open access is not necessarily free to produce. Now it does want free and open access to read and to look at, but it's not necessarily free to make it. However, open access is funded usually by author publishing charges. That is, sometimes authors may have to pay a certain fee to get something published in an open access publication. It can also be published by memberships to professional organizations or scholarly organizations too. And then sometimes an institution or an organization may also cover the cost to publish too. Open access is not necessarily a type of license, but it does use Creative Commons licenses to make it openly available. Open access does not really want to completely eradicate the scholarly publishing business model at all. It's not necessarily that, but it really wants it to incorporate an access model where more people can read the information and see it with less restrictions. And here's a very common misnomer about open access. A lot of people feel like it is always deceptive or predatory publishing. A lot of very unscrupulous businesses have decided to try to use open access as a way to make money. So they'll put either these online open access publications on the web just for the purpose of getting money and to get paid. But it really intended to allow more inclusivity in academic publishing so that more people can have access to read work done by and for academics. And it's also not reduced quality. Some faculty have told me that they're not sure if open access journals are as good as the established one, but I can assure you that the credible ones use various types of peer review, just like the regular established journals tend to. Open access does not require a surrender of copyright by the authors. If anything, they usually get to keep their copyrights. This means that if an author wants to post their work on ResearchGate and it's open access, they usually can. If they want to email PDFs of their articles or their book chapters to colleagues, they can do that. And one big thing too is that faculty are able to reuse their work for their teaching and learning, so they can post their LMS on their, they can post their PDFs or their work on their Blackboard or Canvas pages, and the students can look at it, and they're not going to break copyright doing that. Open access is not necessarily against financial gain for work, the usual work done by faculty and the recognition. That's not really it at all, but rather it's a response to the developments in publishing and funding. And then finally, open access is not a promotion of intellectual laissez-faire where where plagiarism or no attribution is acceptable. That's not the case at all. Maybe it is for unscrupulous journals, but definitely not the credible ones. If anything, open access wants to respect and preserve the norms of peer review and the recognition that faculty and scholars may get through publication and getting their works published. Now, here's where we'll go into why open access. First, we'll look at this from the academic creators and researchers' point of view. One of the things that the faculty have told me about publishing in open access is that their work is more accessible, so more people can read it because a subscription is not required to look at it. People can just go online and find the article and look at it. They also report increased visibility, so their work gets cited a lot more because more people are looking at it. Authors also have a lot more control over their work. They can maintain their copyrights and the rights that go with it, like to share it, to distribute it, to use it for their teaching, and so forth. And then importantly, open access is beneficial for promoting scholarship and ideas. So access to new knowledge ideally will lead to more inquiry, research, and development, and on a more rapid basis. And when you think about what's happening with the pandemic and how beneficial a vaccine would be and improved testing would be, you can see an immediate benefit right there. Also, to give some more benefits for the researchers in the audience, some of you may have public access mandates, which means that your funder wants you to make your work available to the public openly, so that somebody should be able to see your research or your article without having to go into a library subscription or some other or pay to read it. Public access mandates are required by certain types of research done. If you have a federal government sponsored research like through NSF or the NIH. And also some foundations may require that you make your work openly available. The Gates Foundation has this requirement, and so does the Ford Foundation. And then also for teaching and learning purposes, open access can be very beneficial. You want to show your students um, apply your discipline through research. You want to encourage research and discovery and inquiry among your students and show them how it's done. So open access allows you to share your work much easier with the students to do that. And open access is extremely supportive of textbook affordability and open education resource initiatives. You can reuse your work and the students might not have to pay, shouldn't have to pay for it. Now to go for the library and the university level perspective, availability is a big benefit of open access. Works are more readily available to view, and we usually don't have to wait, which is known as an embargo, to view a full article or a publication. Accessibility is also a big aspect of open access. More people can see more work, especially libraries and institutions that are not as well funded. Also, it benefits people in emerging research nations, or what they also call the global south, that can't really afford these big ticket subscriptions to scholarly information. Open access is also beneficial for preservation and archiving. So this means that information published with an open access model have a better chance of being available long term. If a library wants access to a particular publication, it will continue to have it even without a license or a subscription to a particular work. And then funding. Uh, Libraries are getting less funding. University funding models are also in a very challenging state and have been for quite some time. So valuable resources can be reallocated for other necessities and uses when an open access model could be utilized. And for the general public, uh, inclusivity is a big deal because open access intellectual information can they can be in on the action. They could read what's out there. They don't necessarily have to go in the usual routes at this time to get the scholarly information. This is also good for teaching and learning because if the general public can read the research, it can promote lifelong education and informed citizenry, and also promote things like citizen science and consumer health. And then some people really look at this as a very important thing too. That is, it can promote innovation. So perhaps when the general public reads some of this academic work and scholarly research that's being done, they can make novel uses of new discoveries, which could lead to patents, or maybe they can create new businesses or products that could really contribute to the economy, but also the well-being of our community. Okay, next we're going to show you ways how you can identify and support open access publications. One of the best things to do is to explore a journal's attributes at its homepage. To give you this example, there's a journal called PLOS1, Public Library of Science 1. Usually journals will have an about page where you can find out more about who's sponsoring it. Is it an organization? Is it a scholarly community? Who is it? Who's on the editorial board? What are the indexing and abstracting sources and the bibliometrics, such as the hallowed Journal Impact Factor site score. You can also see how often a journal, an open access journal, is published, especially with its consistency. And then you can see the contact information. Who's the editor? How can you get in touch with them? You can also see open access policies and any publication fees. And then if you want to submit a manuscript, you'll see and also see the review process. That information will be on a journal's homepage. So just to give you a little visual here, PLOS1 has an about section that has those special areas where you can get more information. A lot of publishing organizations and other open access organizations have directories. There's one called thinkchecksubmit.org, and they really go into how you can evaluate if an open access publication is legitimate. Then there's like a database, so to speak, called the Directory of Open Access Journals. You can go there and you can check If a journal is included in there, that's usually a good thing. And you could also take a look at what has appeared in a particular journal too when you go through there. ZTalk is offered by the British Library. That gives a lot of information on any given open access journal, and so does the journal guide. Yeah, the open access journal page looks something like this. You can identify journals or you can identify articles that way. And then you've got limiters where you could really drill down on what attributes you want to find with the particular journal. Like you can find out which open access journals are available by a particular subject. You can also look at the author processing charges, that is, if they have any. 70% of open access journals do not have um, article processing charges. And then here's some other ways that you could support open access. You can find a suitable journal and submit your manuscript. So the directory of open access journals and other sources I just went over can help you find a journal. You can ask about your colleagues, see where they publish and how they liked working with the open access publishers and if they felt they were trustworthy. And then another way that you can support open access is to serve on their peer reviewers or be on its editorial board too. Another big way that you can support open access is to inquire about funding. Gold Access is a model that requires no fees to publish. Um, but if you ever have to if you find an open access journal or publication that's suitable and it has an author publishing charge, you can ask for a fee waiver, request that from the publisher. You can also see if your fund or a grant will allow publishing costs to be taken out of your funds. And then you could also inquire with your institution, see if your department or someplace else in your organization does cover the author publishing costs if there are any. You can also self-archive. So if you've already had works that were published, this is known as green access, you can publish your certain types of work in an open access repository. I suggest checking your publisher's policy about doing this, but some publishers do allow authors to deposit their proofs or their peer-reviewed manuscript in an open access repository. We have one here at the FAU library. It's called the Digital Library, and they host the FAU Institutional Repository. Now, for your unsubmitted manuscripts or past works, you can also self-archive that. So just be sure to check your policies for self-archiving things that have already been published. You can also serve and advocate. So you can become a peer reviewer or join the editorial board of an open access journal and also communicate your support. Talk about it with your colleagues, talk about your experience with an open access publication, bring it up for meetings as an agenda item too. That can help get more people interested in open access. And then finally, we can recommend staying updated. You can follow open access journals of interest like Spark and the Open Society Foundations. Open access is discussed very heavily in blogs and social media. The Scholarly Kitchen is a blog by the Society of Scholarly Publishers, so it's both librarians, academics, and publishers who talk about various aspects of publishing on that blog. It's called Scholarly Kitchen. And then also read up on various declarations of support on open access. It actually started out based on conversations between scholars and governments that fund research, and also even some publishers too that wanted to address how the increasing cost of journals and that people were not able to get to them so quickly. So definitely read up on the Budapest Open Access Initiative, which is like the kernel of the open access movement. For more information, we do have an open access library guide. It's at this URL. So you can read about how you can find an open access publisher. We also do cover specific points about open access, like the different funding models that are on there, And then we also give some links to commercial publishers that do have some open access. All the big publishers like Elsevier and Sage do have some journals that are open access, so you can take a look at that. And then you could also get more information about other services offered by the Scholarly Communication Services here at the FAU Library. All right, so I'd like to thank you for attending this presentation, the first presentation we've had for Open Access Week. We will be having another one on Wednesday, October 21 at 1 o'clock, and the title of that is called Open Access, How to Pay or Not to Publish. So we'll give you some more information about the different funding models for open access. So with that, I will conclude my presentation and field any questions that you may have. Any question, big or small? Someone wanted to know if we'll be sending out the recording. This will be posted on YouTube, on a FAU Library's YouTube page. I didn't know if our external relations team wanted to comment more on that. If you're interested in, oh, sorry, go ahead, Tanessa.
A link to the recording will be emailed out to all of the people who have registered for this event. It will come with the link to the evaluation survey.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Tanessa. Okay. Also, if you're interested in getting the slides to this presentation, just leave your email in the chat and I can send you the slides to this presentation if you'd like to keep those. Okay, so one person said, incredibly interesting presentation. Good, I hope it's helpful. And we really hope that this would promote open access on the campus and that you're more, you're more receptive to submitting your work or working on an open access publication. All right, well, okay, and I got a couple, okay, great. I got a couple of people who would like the slides. I'll be sure to send those to you both then, no problem. Other than that, I'd like to thank you for your time and joining us this afternoon on this kind of humid, rainy day here in South Florida. So please join us, come back on Wednesday and we'll go into part 2 of open access. So thank you again for coming in. Thank you for your support of the FAU libraries.